I'm quietly closing my eyes. The world we're seeing now is it real? The touch to the fingertips, the visible colors, the ringing of the ears. If all this doesn't exist, when did humans begin to doubt existence? One sentence we're going to explore today. I think, therefore it exists. There was a huge historical whirlpool that was unimaginable in the background of this horse's appearance in the world. Before this sentence appeared, Europe had lived in a God-centered world for thousands of years. A time when God gives order, gives authority, and rules morality to man. Medieval Europe was centered on theology, not philosophy. Augustine, Thomas Aquinas. Their philosophy was a means of interpreting the Bible, not a means of freeing up human reason. But from the 14th century, Europe starts to change. The Black Death wiped out half of Europe's population. The church became increasingly corrupt, and absolute trust in God began to falter. And in the 15th century, the Renaissance begins. A time when human abilities, human reason, and human dignity were rediscovered. Astronomer Copernicus said, "The Earth is not the center of the universe." These shocking words were not just a turning point in science. It was a declaration that destroyed the picture of the universe that humans believed to be the center. Then Galileo proved this claim by observing the sky with a telescope. The movement to find the truth through reason and experimentation, that was the beginning of modern philosophy. And at the center of it was René Descartes. Descartes was born in 1596, in a small town in France. His life was a thoroughly thinking human life. He was a soldier, a mathematician, a philosopher. Traveling, I observed the various civilizations of the world, and I became obsessed with one question in it. What can I believe? How can I know the truth for sure? He begins to doubt everything he has learned so far. What I learned from books, what I felt from my senses, even the formula of mathematics. And finally, he comes to the fact that he can doubt everything, but he can't deny, "I'm doubting." So he says, "I think therefore I exist." This simple sentence was like a declaration that ended the Middle Ages and started modern times. Now humans are not defined by God. Humans can prove their existence by thinking for themselves. Philosophy was not directed at God. It was a quest for me. And that became the first step in human-centered thinking today, modern philosophy. The starting point of René Descartes' philosophy. It was doubt. He didn't simply say, "Let's not believe it." He said to doubt everything in a thorough, systematic and deliberate way. He called it a methodical meeting. It was not just a meeting to cause confusion. It was a doubt as a tool to reach the absolute truth. Descartes says, "To get to the truth, you have to question everything in life once and for all." He dismantles the things that we believe in every day. Is what I saw real? Maybe you're dreaming right now. Even when we dream, everything feels so real in there. When we close our eyes and fall asleep, we mistake ourselves for living a different reality. If that's the case, wouldn't this life be a dream, too? Descartes never stopped asking these questions. In the end, he even imagines the possibility of the devil. Maybe there is an absolute devil that exists to deceive me, and I am manipulating everything I believe in? What if even the truth of mathematics is being deceived by demons, not by God? So what the hell is real? And so Descartes takes everything down, one by one. This method was a shock to intellectuals of the day. Doubt and topple everything means tradition, authority, religion, sense. Because it meant denying everyone. But Descartes proves that this doubt doesn't stop at just denial. Because the I, who doubts all of it, cannot be denied. Because even if someone says to me, "You don't exist," my consciousness of hearing it still exists. I think, therefore it exists. This is the first and absolute truth that we found at the end of the meeting. More than any God being, more than any philosophical theory, this fact that I'm thinking now is clear. So Descartes finds the starting point of philosophy in the thinking subject, in himself. The Middle Ages started with God, but modern times started with themselves. This is why Descartes' method of meeting is so great, because it was not a denial for destruction, but a constructive dismantling to establish the truth. I think, therefore it exists. Just 7 words. But this short sentence has fascinated philosophers for centuries. The word thinking here means more than just a thought coming to mind. For Descartes, thinking involves all mental activities of doubting, judging, reasoning, understanding, believing, and denying. In other words, thinking means the overall action of the human mind itself. He says this: as soon as the act of thinking stops, so does the conviction of existence. So what does exist mean? Descartes found human existence in the mind, not in the body. It's not the fact that I have hands, I have feet, I have a body, but that the fact that I'm thinking is the most fundamental proof that I exist. This was a complete reversal of the conventional wisdom of the time, finding human identity in the mental self, not in physical reality. With this, Descartes established the concept of self as a subject for the first time in the history of philosophy. I declared myself to be the subject of recognizing my existence before the name, job, or role someone gave me. This is where the important transition takes place. Being is not given from the outside, but self-awareness within me. That's what this one sentence says. Or it exists. Just 7 words. But this short sentence has fascinated philosophers for centuries. The word thinking here means more than just a thought coming to mind. For Descartes, thinking involves all mental activities of doubting, judging, reasoning, understanding, believing, and denying. In other words, thinking means the overall action of the human mind itself. He says this: as soon as the act of thinking stops, so does the conviction of existence. So what does exist mean? Descartes found human existence in the mind, not in the body. It's not the fact that I have hands, I have feet, I have a body, but that the fact that I'm thinking is the most fundamental proof that I exist. This was a complete reversal of the conventional wisdom of the time, finding human identity in the mental self, not in physical reality. With this, Descartes established the concept of self as a subject for the first time in the history of philosophy. I declared myself to be the subject of recognizing my existence before the name, job, or role someone gave me. This is where the important transition takes place. Being is not given from the outside, but self-awareness within me. That's what this one sentence says. After Descartes, philosophy starts to move in a completely different direction. Now, humans are no longer God's creatures, but are reborn as human beings as thinkers. This led to Kant's pure rational criticism, Husserl's phenomenology, and Sartre's existentialist philosophy. The starting point of many philosophical trends is this sentence: I think, therefore it exists. Perhaps this sentence is the most fundamental answer to philosophy that asks why we exist, and the beginning of another question. You are now. Are you really thinking about it? I think, therefore it exists. This sentence is a Korean translation that we are familiar with. Originally, the first language Descartes used was French. Je pense, donc je suis. But it was through Latin translation that this philosophical declaration took on historical weight. Cogito, ergo sum. Latin was the official language of philosophy and the academic language of Europe at the time. This short, powerful sentence instantly shakes the system of philosophy that stood above the religious order of the Middle Ages. Cogito I think, ergo therefore, sum I exist. Every word is clear. Any interpretation was simple enough to be unnecessary. Through this sentence, Descartes argued that philosophy's starting point should no longer be from the outside, but only from the inner self-awareness. The classical reverberation, unique to Latin, made this sentence a more universal declaration. Even at this moment, many philosophers around the world begin to ask the first question of existence through this Latin sentence. Cogito, ergo sum. Because of this single sentence, philosophy breaks away from the neo-centered thinking of the Middle Ages and goes through a great transformation with human-centered thinking. Latin was not just a translation. It was a declaration that changed the direction of philosophy and a symbol that returned the coordinates of thinking to humans. I think, therefore it exists. Why did Descartes put a standard of existence on the act of thinking? It wasn't just an intuition, it was a choice that came from a thorough logical analysis. He doubted every sense, every belief, every tradition, to find a way to prove its existence. However, even at the moment of doubting all of it, I realized that I could not doubt only one thing: the thought of I, who was suspicious. This realization was truly revolutionary. This is because the belief that God exists can be denied, or the world can be an illusion, but the fact that I am conscious now cannot be denied. Descartes declares this as an absolute starting point for human existence. He says, I am a thinker. If I stop thinking, I will not exist. This was the moment when humans were newly defined as mental beings. Until then, humans had only been understood as the union of the soul and the body, or God's creation. But Descartes says, human beings are thinkers. Thought is the essence of being. This perspective has a tremendous impact on subsequent philosophy. Human beings are not just physical beings, they are the self as the subject of thinking. Existence is not determined by the approval of the outside world. The moment I recognize myself, I become present. Descartes defined humans as thinking selves, through the declaration that I think, therefore, exists. So, what exactly is this ego? For Descartes, the ego is not just a perception of oneself. The ego is central to all conscious experiences. This is because humans must first recognize themselves to recognize and evaluate the stimuli before responding to external stimuli. Descartes regarded the self as a thinking subject, and by doing so, he presents a new way to understand human existence. The ego is not just a reflection of the inner experience, it becomes a principle that defines existence in itself. Self-awareness. Self-awareness is an important key to identifying the nature of human existence. This argument by Descartes later establishes itself as one of the core concepts of modern philosophy. It's the establishment of subjectivity. Descartes defined himself as a thoroughly self-aware being, through which man was no longer defined by external conditions, but was reborn as a being who defined himself through his own thoughts and experiences. Descartes' sentence, I think, therefore it exists, goes beyond just philosophical debate and becomes the starting point of modern philosophy. Descartes' theory established the concept of subjectivity in modern philosophy. He made his perception of himself a starting point in that humans exist as the subject of thinking. Previously, medieval philosophy mostly followed the worldview defined by God. However, Descartes doubted the existence of God and insisted that the human subject should be the center of the search for truth. His philosophy greatly influenced the subsequent philosophical trends: Kant's self-awareness, Husserl's phenomenological approach, Heidegger's ontology, etc. These are theories that developed on the basis of Descartes' philosophy. Descartes started in a way that doubted God, but his philosophy eventually gave birth to a philosophy centered on subject and existence. The foundation for the development of modern philosophy began with this: cogito, ergo sum. Descartes had a great influence on science as well as philosophy. He tried to understand nature as a mathematical law, establishing a mechanistic worldview. His claim that the material world works like a machine gives a new direction to the scientific revolution. Descartes tried to explain the world, the creation of God, with mathematical principles, which became an important theoretical basis for the scientific development of Galileo and Newton. However, the scientific method he pursued caused great opposition to philosophers at the time, especially religious philosophers. Descartes' attempts to understand science as mathematical and mechanical principles are evaluated as revolutionary thinking that laid the foundation of modern science. This idea became possible because Descartes analyzed nature and consciousness separately on the philosophical basis of I think. God plays an important role in Descartes' philosophy. He recognized human imperfection, and he tried to define God's perfection through this imperfection. Descartes explains that humans are imperfect because we are limited beings. Humans cannot fully know themselves, and they have limitations in their senses and reason. On the other hand, God claimed to be complete and infinite, so he knew knowledge and truths that we could not experience. Descartes continued his philosophical discussion through the relationship between man and God, acknowledging man as an imperfect being, but also solidifying the existence of God. Today Descartes' quote, "I think, therefore it exists," is still at the center of many philosophical discussions. This sentence now goes beyond mere philosophical declarations and asks profound questions about human existence. The act of thinking is a complex phenomenon that goes beyond just logical reasoning and includes emotions, intuition, and even flows of consciousness. So this sentence asks the important question of what we think, how we exist, not what we think. In fact, in modern philosophy, this sentence of Descartes is no longer a proof of "I exist," but is read as a starting point for exploring the question of "how do I exist?" Self and existence are constantly discussed topics in modern society. This is the time when, unlike in the past, self-awareness and self-existence are more important than ever. As the digital age, the development of artificial intelligence, and human self-awareness grow deeper, the sentence, "I think, therefore it exists," becomes an important question to re-examine the nature of human existence. Today we think of this sentence as closely linked to self-identity, meaning of existence, and self-awareness. The ego is now not just a thinking being, it has expanded to a question of how to live. Descartes' philosophy is thus seen as a key to providing a deep insight into modern society and human existence beyond mere past debates. The sentence, "I think, therefore it exists," remains an eternal philosophical foundation to this day, with the power to make many people agonize over their existence. Through his philosophy, Descartes newly defined the essence of human existence in terms of thought. His legacy went beyond just the philosophical achievements of an era and became an important foundation for shaping modern philosophy and science. The sentence, "I think, therefore it exists," is now considered not just a phrase of philosophy, but a starting point for understanding human existence and an important starting point for self-awareness and self-exploration. The philosophical inquiry that started from that led to the exploration of the relationship between the mind and matter, between the self and the world. Descartes' philosophy did not end in itself, but opened the way for an endlessly expansive philosophical inquiry. The process by which he doubted, questioned, and thought was the starting point for the exploration and thought of all human beings. All those moments today when we ask ourselves questions and reflect on our existence stem from questions that Descartes began to ask. Cogito, ergo sum, "I think, therefore exists." This simple sentence is a sentence that tells us that from the moment we recognize that we are human beings, an endless philosophical journey has begun. This marks a fundamental turning point in philosophy, and even today, Descartes still asks deep questions about human existence and consciousness.